I just turned 30 years old. I've been a gamer for as long as I can remember, with my first memory of video games being Spyro 2. But Spyro 2 was released in 1999. That's 4 years of video game releases that I never got to experience. I feel cheated somehow, so I want to change that. We're gonna go to the actual year I was born, 1995, and take a look at the games that came out when I came out. I want to find the best game from that year. Let's start with Warcraft 2. Before World of Warcraft, the MMO responsible for making me gain 60 pounds as a 13-year-old was regular Warcraft. Warcraft 1 through 3 were all real-time strategy games that completely killed it on sales and popularity. Some of you found out from my last video that I'm not a well-versed gamer, so it may be no surprise that I have never played the original Warcrafts. I was also shitting my pants as a newborn when the second one came out, in my defense. Now, getting Warcraft 2 loaded up was easy. I dropped $10 on the Battle.net app, and in 18 seconds, the 600 megabyte game was ready to launch. Now, you'll have to adjust your eyes to the classic look that 1995 games have for this video, but I actually find old graphics quite charming and elegantly simple. The game opens up with a cinematic explaining what had happened since Warcraft 1. Basically though, it's humans versus orcs and you choose which side you want to fight on. I of course went for the orc campaign. Before each level begins, you get briefed on the mission details and are given objectives on the bottom right. I'm trying to remember another real-time strategy game I've played before, but this might be my first one. Needless to say, I got a bit lost.
We're being attacked!
My first instinct was to charge into the fog of war and initiate battle, which is breaking rule 1 of any real-time strategy game. Rule 1 of real-time strategy games is start to build up your resources. Once I remembered this, I found out you could create peons from the Great Hall, who I'd then command to chop trees and collect gold from the gold mine. My brain is not conditioned for real-time strategy games, so I had yet to comprehend movement for my units, which is clearly identified here when my peon spotted an enemy.
We're being attacked! Zug zug! Zug zug!
Shout out to the on-screen tips that obviously knew I was suffering. A few minutes later, I had peons racking up my gold as I sat and did nothing. This is probably how Jeff Bezos feels every day. I completed the objectives for the first level, and in the second level, I learned that you can highlight a whole bunch of NPCs at once and move them in one solid block. Oh, that's cool. After a few zug-zugs and alrights, I was on my way to level 3. This is where the game got a lot more involved. Additionally, this is the point where the game started to feel more like a game to me. I was having fun, managing all the different aspects of building and upgrading my base. As I increased the amount of workers I had, I would have to build farms so that they could eat. Now, you build farms by using golden wood. That golden wood could also be spent on building even higher level builds like a shipyard. The shipyard allows you to create boats, which are used for collecting oil. The game started to become more complex quickly, and not complex in a confusing way, rather a layered way. There was a snowball effect type thing going on here, and each little peon contributed to the cause. Warcraft 2 and other real-time strategy games feed directly into that sweet spot that games should sit in. It uses some brain power, but not too much to where it feels like an annoying chore or something like that. Just enough brain power to forget about your surroundings or real-life worries. For now, Warcraft 2 is a great game, but it's not the best one from 1995. Maybe I'm not a real-time strategy game enthusiast, but I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It's a solid game, and even more impressive that it came out in 1995. Well, luckily, there are more games on the list, and next up is Donkey Kong Country 2: Diddy Kong's Quest. In modern gaming, it's basically impossible to find platformer games on the top of the gaming genres that year. But in 1995, platformers were easily one of the top genres of gaming. And once I loaded into the first level, it was my job to figure out controls. Each platformer has its own rules and flow to it, something you better get familiar with fast because most platformers ramp up the difficulty quite quickly. The unique mechanic in Donkey Kong Country 2 is the dual component of using both Diddy and Dixie Kong. Now, the best part of any platformer, in my opinion, are the collectibles that are strategically placed in each level. They're placed up high, hidden behind or below the main floor, or just plain impossible to find unless you search the level intimately. 100%ing a game like this would take a ton of patience and honestly some skill. The first level was pretty easy to beat, but like I said, the second level turned the difficulty level up almost absurdly. In the first level, you could never fall off the platforms. In this level, you can fall off easily. and I did, many times. And these early levels are sort of a tutorial for the rest of the game. I think the best video games are the ones that slowly teach you how to play it, not giving you all the answers right away. I wish I did have those answers because I died a lot more than I thought I would in this game. I was frustrated and I felt stupid actually. How can I not clear level 2 of a children's game from 1995? I got through it eventually, but all of those deaths stacked up until I found another shiny coin my pea-brain had to have. I had no idea how you were supposed to get to it, but before I could even find out, I ran out of lives and got a game over. Unlike modern games that autosave every 1 minute, I was sent back to the main screen and met with the saved file screen with nothing to load up. I guess I'm restarting from level 1. Once I got back to where I was, I eventually got further and found Kong College. This is where you could finally save the game. I am playing on an emulator, so I do have save states, but I forgot to make one earlier. The rest of my playthrough was pretty smooth, actually, once I got more comfortable with the movement. The boss fight against the bird was fun, though I had way more fun in the next level using the spider power-up. You press a button to shoot webs, and the second press of that button would stop that web in its place, allowing you to jump on it. Clearing the end of Crocodile Cauldron was guarded by an evil sword boss. Modern games have you battling some seriously gruesome looking monsters, but old Nintendo games were like, fuck it, make them defeat a sword with cannonballs. It was quite tough, actually. Hectic, even. I think Donkey Kong Country 2 is a great game. I haven't really talked about it before, but I love the speedrunning community. So after I beat Donkey Kong Country 2, I could see myself stretching out the game's playability through speedrunning. Speedrunning is amazing. I mean, if you look at a game like Super Mario 64, there are still, 30 years later, new movements and mechanics being found that have made the game last as long as it has. And for all those reasons, I'd rank this game 9 out of 10. The gameplay, the music, and its difficulty are all lovely. If any game was to top the charts for 1995, this was the one. I mean, the development team for Chrono Trigger is often referred to as the Dream Team. You've got Hironobu Sakaguchi, who created Final Fantasy, Yuji Horii, who created Dragon Quest, and Akira Toriyama, the author of the Dragon Ball manga series. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Chrono Trigger is easily the best game of these first 3 games we've talked about so far. I don't know how else to explain this, but the second I started the game, I had a sense that it wasn't like other games. The first thing the game has you do is head to Lean Square, where the Millennial Fair was ongoing. I didn't realize it until now, but it's kind of sad how many great games I've missed throughout the years. I play a lot of competitive games, so while other gamers experiment with different genres and styles, I'm stuck sweating, desperately trying to improve, but the reality is, most video games I play have lacked a depth that I didn't know I appreciated. The depth I'm talking about? Well, how about here at the Millennial Fair? They have a system in place that resembles an arcade where you can earn silver points from mini-games set up around the square. Maybe I've got a few wires connected to wrong places in my brain, but I found this bell game way too fun. I'm going until I don't get a point. This has to be this is a world record. Is this like a diagnosis of some kind? Like, do I have a problem? I messed around for way too long, but eventually I ended up in the right place to cue the storyline. I bumped into this girl, and she must have seen me killing it at the bell game because she asked me to hang out with her all day. Now, the main attraction of the Millennial Fair was at the northern part where my nerdy friend would show off her new invention. This thing could teleport you from one machine to the other. The foreshadowing was pretty strong because I knew when the little redhead got into that machine, something would go wrong. And I was right. A rift opened up and sent her back in time. Like any gentleman would do, I agreed to go into the rift to look for her. Now, the game finally begins. Except, I lost all my health fighting the robot on the western side of the fair and was immediately destroyed upon exiting the rift. I forgot to make a save state again, so I had to restart the game from the beginning. Once I returned to this spot, I had enough health to fight back, and the combat in this game is actually quite fun. It uses a system called active active time battle, which I think is in some Final Fantasy games. But I would use my sword to slash enemies, able to freely choose which one I attack first. I also had MP, magic points, that would be used later on for more powerful attacks. Furthermore, the game gives you 4 item slots that you can swap gear between. Being able to select which weapons and gear you want to use is great for customization and power creep. There's also plenty of supplemental items like heals and tonic, ether and shelters, all there to aid you in battle. You can collect these items from chests or through reward after defeating enemies. All great role-playing game staples. The map also changed drastically in this new era of time. I think we're back about 400 years or so, which I learned from talking to random people in a bar. Impressively, it only takes about 30 to 40 minutes of gameplay to get sucked into the story and environment. I love feeling like I am in a completely unique universe, and Chrono Trigger nails this. The story, by the way, is enthralling. The redhead girl we bumped into in the beginning is the current time Princess Nadia, and the time we just got teleported back to has a king and queen. The queen of 400 years ago is Nadia's great-great-grandmother and is in trouble of being captured and killed. Of course, if that happens, Nadia, the girl we met at the fair, would cease to exist. A grandfather paradox. The game builds on this story, and you'll find yourself accompanied by side characters. When you have at least one or more team members, your techs, the magic style attacks, they upgrade. So normally I have a move called Cyclone, but when I am with Luca, the girl who created the teleporter, that Cyclone becomes a Fire Whirl, a spinning attack that hits multiple enemies with a ton of damage. I think this is an awesome way of spicing up combat, and I am falling in love with the game quickly. I still have a lot more to play, so I can't tell you how the game ends, but I can say this. I'm glad I was born in 1995 and decided to do this video because I get to experience an amazing game. It's an easy 10 out of 10 for me. I can't wait to finish it later. It is going to be difficult to beat Chrono Trigger, but we still have 5 games to go over, and next up is Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Yeah, it's turning out that 1995 was not a bad year for video game releases at all. I might be overreacting here, but every single title sequence for these games have been great. It really drops you directly into their respective worlds. Now, just like Donkey Kong Country, each platformer has its unique set of mechanics. For Yoshi's Island, we get to deal with Baby Mario, and if Yoshi gets hit, he will float away in a bubble, crying. You've got 10 seconds to retrieve him, or you lose a life. It's pretty simple, but something not so simple was how slippery the movement felt. It's hard to explain, but it feels like you can't adjust your movement as easily as you could in Donkey Kong Country 2. But maybe this is just a temporary feeling. Speaking of feeling, Yoshi's Island is probably one of the happiest looking games I have ever seen. The surrounding 2D art is colorful, floral, and saturated. Now, I didn't mean to do this, but I found myself comparing Yoshi's Island to Donkey Kong Country 2, and starting out, I'm not too impressed with Yoshi's Island's gameplay. These tip blocks littered the platforms, and the extra collectibles weren't too difficult to reach. I know how platformers work, so I knew it was probably only a matter of time before this changed. But 4 levels in, on the first boss battle, I still found the game to be a little boring. It's almost as if things are moving at 0.5 speed. Beating this boss took negative brain power. There is no pattern or problem to solve, and even though I got hit, I had 25 seconds to retrieve Baby Mario, which was even easier because you get a couple seconds of invulnerability. The next level did begin to show some promise with hiding the extra collectibles in spots that were a little harder to get to, but everything still seems slow. Moving on through the levels, it's apparent that this game prioritizes the collectibles, and the difficulty scale in acquiring those is outpacing the enemy's difficulty scale. I died about 15 times in Donkey Kong Country 2, but I don't think I've lost even 1 life on Yoshi's Island. Another hour of gameplay passed, and the levels were continuing the trend of complicating the collectibles and puzzles required to progress, but enemies stayed mostly the same. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just wasn't my favorite experience. I mean, even the Boo boss fight was uninspired. It's a super chill game, but Yoshi's Island was not my favorite. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, but maybe the final levels will change that when I decide to complete it later on. The 5th game on the list that I played was Mech Warrior 2 31st Century Combat, a vehicle simulation game played originally on the PC. I won't lie, I was not excited to try this one out. It looks very outdated, but contrary to its looks, it was far from simple. First of all, it took me a good half a day to find a copy that would work with my system. Once I did find a portable version, we were up and running, except we weren't. MechWarrior 2 has taught me how grateful I am to have standardized button mapping because the controls for this game were confusing, to say the least. Just take a look at these keyboard commands. I'm pretty sure if I could figure out how to work my mech, I could probably land a Boeing 747 too. Since I didn't think to Google right away, I went into the files and found a list of the controls, and that just made things worse. But I will say, when I did figure it out, the game got a lot better. The game has 2 clans you can join, and you accept missions that were either search and destroy or base strike. Regardless of the mission, I found myself overheating. A pretty annoying mechanic that would shut down your mech for an uncomfortably long time if you fired too many shots too quickly. But balancing your firepower and the overheating was part of the experience. The mech suits were actually individually categorized into sections which would break when under fire. It's a pretty cool feature that I honestly did not expect to find in a game from 1995. Still, I could not get over the environmental detail, and it gave a pretty empty feeling, something I feel greatly inhibited the experience for me. On the contrary, the music enhanced the playthrough. But to be fair, most soundtracks from these older games way outlast their gameplay. All in all, I can tell why this game was popular back in the day. I think it really shines in some areas, and at that time, standardized button mapping wasn't really there for PC games, so I don't think that affected the players too much. So, subtracting the annoyance of figuring out the controls in the beginning, I'd give this game a solid 7 out of 10. I think it has a lot of potential for those of you who enjoy using your entire keyboard to play a game. So go ahead and play it if you like that. So far, it's safe to say that there are so many good games in 1995, and I feel like I missed out. But we still have some more. One game that was high on the list was a little artillery tactical game called Worms. There have been many Worms games since the original one in 1995, so it has obviously been a successful video game concept. I gotta be honest though, this game is not that fun without other real people to play with. It's not very easy to aim your weapons, and the AI has no issues and systematically clapped me. The game does have a lot to offer though. Plenty of weapon choices, wind modifiers, and many maps that challenge your geometric calculations. It feels unfair to give a rating since I didn't really play the game properly, but I could see this being a lot of fun with a few drinks on the weekend with the boys. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's more of a every once in a while game. All right, let's move on to our next game of 1995, a game called Full Throttle. Even though I haven't played any of the previous games, I had at least heard of them. But Full Throttle I've never heard in any conversation. So this game is categorized as a graphic adventure video game, but I feel it was more of an interactive story mode game. Now, I've rarely, if ever, touched a game like this before, so when it took 10 minutes to go through the intro sequence cinematics, I didn't know what to think. Like, am I watching a movie or am I playing a video game? But those first 10 minutes were important. They, of course, laid down the story, and we learned that the main protagonist belongs to a motorcycle gang called the Polecats. The motorcycle manufacturer, apparently the last manufacturer still around, was owned by this guy and his shady vice president, Adrian Ripburger. Cool fact, by the way, this Ripburger guy is voiced by Mark Hamill. Anyways, the two of them were on the way to a shareholders meeting, and to keep things brief, Ripburger is scheming to take control of the company. While they're on their way, the Polecats drove past them, and that impressed the CEO, who used to be a biker himself, but Ripburger wasn't having it. Later on down the road at a bar, this Ripburger guy asks the Polecats to escort their limousine to the meeting, but Ben, the guy we'll be controlling later on, declines.
Not interested.
Things take a turn for the worse as Ben got beat up in the back of the bar, and we wake up hearing news that the rest of the biker gang is up ahead where an ambush is planned.
I overheard them say something about an ambush up the road.
I wasn't too impressed so far. I personally feel video games should have more gameplay than cutscenes, but I was very wrong in this opinion. Full Throttle has become one of my favorite games I've ever played.
What are you?
Alright, so now that we're playing, the first objective we had to do was to restore the bike with the help from Maureen. To do this, I would need to find 3 parts that she requires to fix it. Now, this is one of those games where dialogue is important to listen to because it provides information and story elements necessary to advance. I didn't realize this at first, and I failed to listen that well, and the consequences would soon be felt. More impressive than the dialogue and story building was the gameplay. Historically, I prefer games with a high skill ceiling and freedom of movement. Full Throttle has none of that, but is still perfect in my eyes. When you hover over objects on screen, sometimes the cursor gets a little red outline around it, which indicates that you can interact with it. Not everything in the environment has a purpose or can be clicked, but our job is to figure out what is important. I was stumped for about 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do. In those 30 minutes, however, I became very analytical of the environment, and I was indirectly forced to experience every tiny detail of it. One of the 3 items I had to get back to Marine, the girl fixing my bike, was a gas can filled with oil. Here's how I ended up getting it. First of all, you need a gas can. I grabbed this in Marine's shop before I left. Next, I had to find where I could get gas. While I was exploring and searching in those first 30 minutes, I figured out in the upper right of the map that this was a gas tower. Great, I just gotta get the gas from there. Of course, the problem is I have to get through the locked door first. For the next 15 minutes or so, I interacted with every possible thing I saw again, but with a stroke of luck, I clicked on the small section above Todd and found a cabinet. I finally came across something that I had missed, but Ben told me,
It's empty,
but he also said something else.
but there's something hanging on the door.
I searched and searched, but I didn't see anything on the door until I clicked right where I needed to. On accident. This tiny little 5-pixel long gray thing is a lockpick. So apparently in this game, you've got to really pay attention to your surroundings. Now, with the help of the lockpick, the door at the gas tower was able to be unlocked. I tried to climb up the ladder, but an alarm went off and the police were alerted.
All right there. I'm talking to you, boy.
Of course, it wasn't going to be that simple. So I figured I would just try again, and obviously going up the ladder wouldn't work, so I chose to go towards the back of the tower where it looked a lot more shadowy.
Ryan, where are you? Hey, where is he?
It felt good to get something right fairly quickly, too. That pride vanished fast because now the police were patrolling on top of the tower, preventing me from getting the gas. After wandering around for another 5 minutes, I came back and noticed the hover sled has a gas cap conveniently hanging out of the vehicle. Another few minutes passed and I was stumped again. This game demands that you keep patient and keen-eyed because if I had, I would have saw that there was a hose I could have grabbed a long time ago in Marine's shop. Finally, after 2 hours since the game started, I would make some progress. You'd think that this was upsetting to me, but I found the whole experience fun as hell. I'm not gonna give everything away in case you plan on playing this game, which I strongly suggest. So even though I love this game, unfortunately, it loses a lot of its fun on a second or third playthrough. So although it's one of my favorite games of all time now, I think it might not be that fun to play after one playthrough. I'm still gonna give it an easy 9 out of 10. And the final game from 1995 was another platformer called Rayman. Now I'll get straight to the point here. Rayman is a rough game. Its gameplay is super slow and honestly, it's too easy. The environmental detail has nothing on Donkey Kong Country 2 or Yoshi's Island, and the soundtrack is meh in comparison. That is all true until I got to the second level called Bandland. The gameplay sped up to basically double, the difficulty of the platforming and the enemies increased like crazy, and the environment and music improved drastically. This game is honestly no joke. I died so many times to some of the most basic enemies with no excuse. I don't remember the exact level here, but there was no possible way that a child is clearing this section in under 20 minutes. So the trumpets on the side of the barriers blow their horns and it speeds Rayman up rapidly. You're supposed to go back and forth, perfectly timing your jumps and sometimes adjusting your landing spot in midair while maintaining momentum to clear some of the larger jumps. I consider myself a better than average gamer with mechanics of games, but this one had me feeling incapable. I did manage my way to get through it. Yup, you guys can all clap for me. And you know this part was difficult because the developers threw a save spot right after you clear it. Another difficult aspect to Rayman is the fact that you can't prepare for what's coming next. There's just no way of predicting what you're about to run into. About an hour later, I came across probably my least favorite thing in any video game that I've come across in a long time. This godforsaken fly was the bane of my existence. So this fly mimics everything Rayman does. So if you charge your fist and throw it, he's just gonna dodge it. If you jump, he jumps. And if you get too close, his attacks strike very quickly. Thankfully, I made a save state right before this guy because if I didn't, I probably would not have played any farther. Seriously, I could not get past him, and I convinced myself there must be another way through this level. But there wasn't. You have to get through this guy, and through sheer luck, I avoided one of his attacks, and I think getting him to move one platform above messed with his conditional programming, and I managed to take him out. I can say without hesitation that Rayman is much more difficult than Yoshi's Island, and if you're looking for a challenge, Rayman is the game for you. I think Rayman has big potential for 100%ing it, and don't even get me started on speedrunning this game. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 because I like the challenge it poses, and the environment and feel of the game grew on me over time. So that is the end of the list of games I wanted to try from 1995, and the question is, do I still feel bad about missing games from 1995? Well, no, of course not. I just played them. But are the games good? I think so. I think 1995 has a great mix of challenging games, beautiful games, heavy control-based games, and it has my favorite of all, Chrono Trigger. I'm glad I decided to make this video because I got to play some really cool games. Thank you for 10,000 subscribers. Just make sure you click subscribe if you're watching this. I'm gonna have some more bangers come out. I know you won't regret it. All right, take care, everyone.